He hates sand. That's it. That's the answer to one of the biggest plot holes in Star Wars, and I'm about to prove it. Someone typed those 3 words into a comments section beneath a video about this exact mystery. The comment pulled 873 likes. It tripled the engagement of every serious canonical theory in the thread, every careful citation, every force-masking framework, every lore-dense argument assembled by people who cross-reference episode numbers. A meme beat all of them. A punchline referencing the most mocked line in prequel history outperformed organized analysis on the same question in the same space on the same day. The crowd voted with their thumbs and moved on without stopping to ask why it felt correct. The reason it felt correct is the actual argument. Obi-Wan Kenobi hid on Tatooine because of it being Vader's homeworld, because Tatooine was the one planet in the galaxy where Darth Vader's unprocessed trauma made a serious search psychologically impossible. Obi-Wan Kenobi, who spent more than a decade at close range studying the exact nature of that trauma, was counting on this completely. After Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan takes the infant Luke Skywalker and places him on Tatooine, Anakin Skywalker's homeworld. Owen and Beru Lars, Anakin's step-relatives, take the child in. These are the same people Anakin physically visited on the worst night of his life. The child's last name stays Skywalker. No false identity, no misdirecting trail, no meaningful effort to obscure the connection to the Empire's second most powerful figure. Obi-Wan then settles nearby himself, adopts the alias Ben, and moves into a stone hut on the edge of the Jundland Wastes. For approximately 20 years, he stays there. During those same 20 years, Darth Vader commanded the full strength of the Imperial military, crushing windpipes from across rooms, personally leading boarding operations against rebel ships, hunting Order 66 survivors across the galaxy with methodical precision. The Empire's intelligence apparatus operated across the entire galaxy. Order 66 survivors on planets far more obscure than Tatooine got hunted down and eliminated. The desert planet where Vader's own stepfamily was raising a child named Skywalker, in the homestead Vader personally visited on the worst night of his life, received precisely no serious investigation from any of these resources across 2 full decades. A New Hope makes this almost specific in its absurdity. When R2-D2 eventually makes his way from Tatooine's surface to Obi-Wan's actual door, Vader stays on the Star Destroyer. Sandtroopers go door to door through Mos Eisley and fail to locate a Jedi Master who had been living 40 minutes from the Lars homestead for 20 years. The most dangerous Force-sensitive being alive, commanding the apparatus that tracked Jedi survivors across the entire galaxy, directed none of it at the one location he had every logical reason to check first. Strip the familiarity away. Imagine this as a thriller you've never seen. A fugitive hides for 20 years on his pursuer's childhood planet, next door to the pursuer's family, raising the pursuer's biological child under the pursuer's own last name, while the pursuer deploys the most powerful military intelligence apparatus in the galaxy, literally everywhere else. The plot hole isn't subtle, it's structural, and it's been sitting in plain sight since 1977. Fandom pressed on this for decades. Planetary force-masking theories filled forums for decades. Statistical arguments emerged about finding one specific person among a galaxy of quadrillions. Elaborate lore frameworks got assembled around what is, at its core, a simple question. Why didn't Vader just go home? Serious theorists built careful cases. Then someone typed 3 words. The comment hit 873 likes, and the internet delivered its verdict in a format normally reserved for reaction content. The verdict was right. Understanding why means going back to a Tusken Raider camp somewhere in the Jundland Wastes, a fold of rocky terrain that traps the day's heat long after both suns go down. Attack of the Clones establishes early that Anakin had been having nightmares about his mother, Shmi. Vivid, recurring, specific enough to disrupt his sleep on Coruscant and gnaw through every formal function where he was supposed to demonstrate Jedi detachment. He convinced Padme to reroute their mission through Tatooine, framed it as Force intuition, which was accurate, but also a useful way to avoid saying the plainly embarrassing thing that he couldn't stop dreaming about his mother dying and needed to confirm she was still alive. What he found at the Lars homestead was worse than anything his dreams had constructed. Shmi had been gone for a month. Tusken raiders had taken her from the farm, and Klieg Lars, who had bought her freedom from slavery and married her, had organized a rescue party of 30 men. He came back with 7 survivors. Klieg told Anakin, with the hollow certainty of a man who had already finished grieving, that she was almost certainly gone. The desert kept what it took. Anakin went anyway. He found the camp in the early dark, moved through it, located the right tent. Inside, he cut down a woman still breathing, but only barely. Shmi had been held for a month, and by the time Anakin reached her and cut her restraints, survival was a dim probability. She was conscious enough to recognize him, to say his name, to tell him she loved him and wasn't afraid. Then she died in his arms, in a tent, in the sand, on the planet he had spent his entire childhood wanting to escape. What followed is in the canonical record. He went through that camp, and when he described it to Padme back at the Lars homestead, the accounting was total: men, women, and children. Academic analysis of Anakin's psychological arc, across multiple published sources, consistently identifies this as the primary clinical event of his entire story: catastrophic traumatic loss, uncontrolled violent response, then immediate burial of both beneath the Jedi Order's disciplinary framework, a system that offered exactly 0 mechanisms for processing grief about an attachment that was, according to that system, supposed never to have been formed. He wept through the telling, said he should be better than this, knew while saying it that whoever better referred to was a person he wasn't sure he could locate in himself anymore. He buried Shmi in the desert, went back to the war. Across every canonical appearance in episodes 1 through 6, he never addresses it again. That Naboo balcony scene, the one that precedes all of this chronologically, is where the fandom first saw the wound without recognizing it. Golden light off the water, soft evening air, pastoral sunset. Anakin stands near Padme and talks about sand. He says it's coarse and rough and irritating and gets everywhere. He reaches for her arm. The fandom mocked this line for more than 20 years, and the mocking is entirely justified. It's objectively terrible seduction, a young man attempting romance by cataloging a texture, delivered with an earnestness that amplifies every flaw in the approach. But the specific discomfort it generates doesn't feel quite like regular bad writing. Watching someone speak with genuine emotional intensity about an innocuous sensory irritant produces a particular unease. The feeling of watching a person reach for a completely inadequate proxy to carry something far too large and dangerous to name. Anakin isn't upset about silicon dioxide. He's upset about the place where sand happened to be, while something terrible was building toward him just over the horizon. The coarse grit of Tatooine's desert, carrying in its texture the night he would spend in a tent, unable to undo what had already been done. The line sounds overwrought because the overflow is real. The thing it can't contain keeps pressing through the edges. The fandom laughed at him for over 2 decades. Something in that laughter always carried recognition that arrived faster than the analysis to support it. The 151 engagement comment in that competitor thread made the serious version of this argument directly. Vader would never go back to his homeworld because of the pain he felt when he lost his mother there. The 873 engagement comment was pointing at identical psychological architecture from a completely different angle, through the compressed, deflective efficiency of a 3-word mean. Both responses exist in the same thread. Most of the same people presumably read both. Nobody made the connection between them explicitly. The meme crowd voted for the joke. The serious theory crowd voted for the analysis. The gap between those vote counts is where the actual argument lives. Trauma-based geographic avoidance isn't a subtle phenomenon. When a catastrophic event occurs at a specific location, That place accumulates emotional weight the nervous system registers before conscious decision-making can engage, producing resistance, hesitation, manufactured reasons to be elsewhere, an unwillingness to approach the relevant coordinates that the person experiencing it often can't recognize as avoidance at all. They just find themselves going other places, assigning themselves other priorities. For Darth Vader, Tatooine carries this charge at maximum amplitude. That planet holds the coordinates where his mother died in his arms, where the Jedi-trained young man who wasn't supposed to have personal attachments discovered exactly what happened when an unacknowledged attachment got severed without warning or preparation. Approaching those coordinates means activating, below the threshold of language, the worst night in Anakin Skywalker's life. Everything that lives behind the infrastructure of the armor and the rank and the certainty of purpose. Scholarly analysis of the saga is consistent across sources. This wound was never healed, never metabolized, never addressed across any canonical appearance in episodes 1 through 6. Burial isn't healing. The ground remembers what you put in it. The canonical record of what Vader didn't do provides the evidence. No confirmed visit to Tatooine between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. 20 years of Imperial reach, 20 years of absence from that single desert planet. An asset who can't designate a location as a search priority doesn't need to dramatically hate the place at point of contact. Avoidance operates upstream, at the level where assignments get issued and priorities get set, long before any boots would hit sand. The dog didn't bark. 20 years, not once. The second structural force keeping Vader from Tatooine is Palpatine, and the comment thread ranked this as its second most compelling theory at 291 likes, well behind the meme, but far ahead of everything else. The observation that Palpatine foiled literally every significant independent plan Anakin attempted across the prequels captures something real about how their dynamic actually functioned. The prequel trilogy demonstrates across multiple films that Anakin acting on his own instincts, rather than assigned directives, produced outcomes nobody predicted and nobody controlled, including outcomes that complicated Palpatine's own strategies. By the time Vader existed, this operational pattern was established data. What followed was the arrangement any competent handler constructs around an asset too valuable to lose and too volatile to free. Vader hunted Jedi survivors, commanded fleet operations, led boarding parties, ran interrogations, executed the campaigns the Empire required. Every canonical appearance in episodes 3 through 6 places him inside assigned activities, mission-directed, aimed at authorized targets, operating within parameters Palpatine controlled. The proposition that Palpatine knew Obi-Wan was specifically on Tatooine and deliberately engineered a blind spot to prevent Vader from finding him is compelling architecture, and the mental image of the Emperor working himself into operational fury over another foiled plan has obvious comedic appeal. But no canonical scene in episodes 1 through 6 confirms it. The claim is unverified, and treating it as settled canon would be a disservice to the actual evidence. What the record shows is that Palpatine kept Vader occupied and directed as standard operational practice, and the combination of that management structure with Vader's own psychological avoidance produced 20 years of Tatooine absence, without either mechanism needing to consciously coordinate with the other. Two forces pointing the same direction. Same result. What Palpatine definitively accomplished was keeping Vader continuously deployed. A man with perpetual assignments and perpetual enemies scattered across the Outer Rim doesn't get idle time to follow old wounds back to their source. Vader commanded fleets and executed the Emperor's priorities. His gaze stayed aimed outward, away from Tatooine, away from sand, away from the desert planet where a former Jedi Master was finding the silence very encouraging indeed. Obi-Wan's strategy, viewed from outside with the comfortable familiarity stripped away, lands somewhere between bold tactical genius and the kind of plan that sounds completely insane until you understand the specific psychology of the person you're hiding from. He placed Darth Vader's biological child with Darth Vader's step-relatives under the name Skywalker on Darth Vader's home planet, within practical speeder bike range of the farm where Darth Vader spent his childhood. Then he moved in nearby, took the name Ben, suppressed his force use deliberately, lived small and quiet, and dressed in the robes and weathered aesthetic of Tatooine's permanent population, which runs heavily toward hooded, bearded figures with sun-squinted eyes and the unhurried manner of people who've been losing an argument with an arid climate for decades. This isn't a cheap observation. Moisture farmers dress for sand survival above everything else. The settlements are full of people whose entire aesthetic is heat management and pragmatism. Ben Kenobi, sitting in a stone hut at the edge of the Jundland Wastes, looked like the 47th most interesting person in any 3-kilometer radius. Nothing about him generated the kind of story that gets repeated in cantinas and eventually transmits up intelligence chains. He also didn't act like a hero. For 20 years, with his considerable emotional investment in the child at the Lars homestead 40 minutes away, he apparently held the line against every pull toward the kind of action that had defined his entire pre-Sith existence. Heroism generates stories. Stories generate witnesses. Witnesses generate intelligence signatures. An imperial apparatus scanning a galaxy of quadrillions for one specific force-sensitive fugitive would find nothing flaggable in the outer settlements of Tatooine's Dust Bowl, just an unremarkable old man buying supplies and keeping his opinions about the current political arrangement entirely to himself. Kenobi weaponized Vader's psychological trauma, turning the planet's emotional toll into an impenetrable shield no imperial intelligence apparatus could compensate for. Because the gap in the search wasn't logistical. It wasn't a resourcing problem or a strategic oversight. It was built from the inside, from grief that never got processed, from a wound that Anakin buried in Tatooine's sand, and Darth Vader carried forward without ever once choosing to go back and examine it. Obi-Wan had studied Anakin Skywalker at close range for more than a decade, close enough to recognize the unhealed architecture of someone carrying a wound the Jedi system never gave him language for. He understood, through that sustained proximity, what the sand of that planet now meant to the person who had been his Padawan, what charge it carried, what it activated, what happened below language when Tatooine entered the conversation. The hiding spot wasn't chosen despite Vader's connection to the planet. He chose it because he understood exactly what Tatooine cost Darth Vader to approach, and bet 20 years of his life that the cost was high enough to function as a barrier no imperial apparatus would ever cross. The barrier wasn't logistical. It was sand. What the meme crowd was doing, without consciously knowing it, was drawing on accumulated emotional understanding of Anakin Skywalker's arc, the felt knowledge that lives in anyone who has absorbed these films deeply enough over enough years. Memes operate at the level of compressed cultural recognition. They encode what large numbers of people already sense to be emotionally true, before those people can articulate the mechanism behind it. He Hates Sand hit 873 likes as an answer to the plot hole question because it felt correct, not because 873 people had run the psychological analysis, but because the psychological analysis was already embedded in the line itself, in Anakin's delivery of it in 2002, in the specific uncomfortable texture of the Naboo scene, in the way his relationship to that sensory detail had always carried more weight than the face value of the words could hold. Anakin told everyone watching exactly where he was most vulnerable. He said it badly, earnestly, on a balcony in golden light, reaching for someone's arm, complaining about a texture. The line became a punchline because the overflow was visible and the source was hidden. The joke was pointing at the wound the whole time. The serious theory crowd at 151 likes could name the mechanism. The meme crowd at 873 likes compressed it to 3 words. Obi-Wan Kenobi built a 20-year plan around what both groups were, in their different registers, describing. Twin suns kept rising over the same farm, the same desert, the same coarse, rough, irritating sand that gets everywhere, and that, when exploited by the right person who understood the right wound, kept an extraordinary secret for 2 decades without difficulty. The plan held. Vader never came. The boy grew up. The funniest line in the prequel trilogy turned out to be the most strategically accurate thing Anakin Skywalker ever said about himself. He told everyone exactly where he was most vulnerable. He broadcast it in the worst romantic dialogue in franchise history, on a balcony, in the golden light of Naboo's evening, and the fandom laughed for 20 years. Obi-Wan Kenobi was apparently paying much closer attention. Subscribe. There's a lot more of this kind of analysis coming.